Did you know that most women would rather talk about their own death than their finances? Well, we're here to change that. Welcome to Bixie Speak, where we speak honestly about money and share our personal journeys of making it, losing it, and investing it. We focus on real life situations that affect us, women living in cities all around the world, from Bangkok to Bangalore. You know, we're just out here trying to live our best lives, but in order to do that, we have got to turn our finances around, from being obstacles to living our dreams to becoming opportunities to make our dreams a reality. In each episode, we tackle a typical life event in the life of an urban woman the world over and the role that money plays in helping or harming our situations. We'll invite guests to share their experiences from mating and money to marriage and money, all the way to fertility and our finances. Nothing is off limits. I'm your host, Ville Gitau, CEO of Bixie, a financial platform aimed at helping women take control of their finances and live the life of our dreams. Full disclaimer though, we are not Bixie, nor Bixie Speaks is not a financial advisor and does not provide financial advice. We're an education platform. Learn more about us and our community on www.mybixie.com or download the Bixie app on Apple Store or Google Play. Welcome to the wonderful world of Bixie. So let's get into it. Today, we are tackling family and finances. Yes, for those of you who can't see our guest's reaction, it's one of profound discomfort. Why? Because this is probably going to be our most controversial episode to date. For those of you who are Filipinos, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the incessant borrowing, the unpaid loans, the land disputes, the gossip, the drama. From Mumbai to Manila, finances and family are intricately tied. And beyond just the nuclear family, especially where we all live here in the global South. So on today's episode, we're going to talk about our own journeys, navigating our financial journeys with our families. And no better person to talk about this than with my own family member, Ville Gitau. Welcome, Ville.
Hello.
Ville is an amazing woman, lawyer, entrepreneur, fashionista, K-pop fangirl, based in the Philippines, and she's also family. So once again, welcome to the show. Okay. She's literally squirming in discomfort.
Can I go? I think I have a meeting.
Yeah, so the studio's locked. So I'm just gonna rip the Band-Aid right off. What role does money play in the dynamics of our family? And before I start, actually, allow me to give a little bit of background. So Womboy is my little sister. And we share both same mother, same father. And we are very much manifest from the global South. Our mother is from the Philippines. Our father is from Kenya. And navigating all of those dynamics of family and finances, this has literally been a global challenge for Womboy and I, who've often found ourselves caught in the middle of a lot of this. So this episode really is about family with a capital F, the big family. The cousins, the aunts, the uncles, the everybody, right? We will have another episode that focuses more on the nuclear family. But for today, we're going to be focusing on family with a big, big F. So what role has money played in the dynamics of your family with a big F? And by extension, my own family. What's been the money that it has played, the role that money has played in that dynamic? You can start with easy words. Happy, sad.
No, I mean, it's generally okay. Okay. And it actually provided, like a lot of, like needs and also comfort to everyone. I have to be honest with that. And I grew up in the Philippines with our, Filipino grandparents. And they actually provided for me, especially when I was really young. And to be honest, we weren't like the affluent family in the north, but I can say that money wasn't really like, like a struggle. Like, so, this has actually like affected, me in a lot of ways as well. And I of course, this relationship with money that our grandparents have, affected like the entire family. So it affected like my dynamics with money, the other people's dynamics with money, like, our aunts or other cousins. So, it wasn't like easy, like, but it's generally, it has given me, a sense of, comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say that, you talk about like our grandparents' relationship with money? Our grandparents, for those in the audience, are rice farmers and have had the same rice farm passed down from family to family for hundreds of years. And they, I have my, right when you said that they have an interesting relationship with money, so many of my money habits were actually informed by their dynamic with money. And not just them themselves, but their dynamic as farmers and yields with money, because on our Kenyan side, same dynamic. Kenyan grandparents were also farmers. So I learned a lot of like my relationship with money from their relationship with money, which was, there's two things. There was a direct correlation always between hard work and money.
Yes.
Right? So that was always really ingrained from day one.
Yes.
And number two, like all things with harvests, there are times of plenitude and times of scarcity. So you always had to plan your money like annually.
Oh, wow. Yes.
As opposed to, it's payday, big day, let's spend it all. It's like, yes, on harvest day, with the pilau, like, sure, it seemed like you had a lot of money. But when you break it down into 12 months, it was, enough to pay, obviously, the bills. So I feel like I still, even though, you and I have had careers that are vastly different than being agricultural farmers, I think we have a little bit of those relationships too. Like, really hard work translates to earnings.
Yeah.
And being cautious of like times of like abundance and times of scarcity and planning for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I still hold that to my heart to this day. Like, sorry, but I'm not a staunch believer in like working like, I should just work smart, stop working hard. It's always been working hard for me. Like,
I'm the same, but I also know that a lot of the research indicates that like strategic working is also really important. And for me, I find it really difficult to balance because, I'm like you. I think, well, get up at 5 a.m. because our grandfather gets up at 5 a.m. and, you put in the 14 hours or 16 hours and you'll reap what you sow. And do you still think that applies in a modern financial economy? Like, I look around and I see a lot of people just doing something on TikTok and, reaping quite a lot. And I think particularly our younger listeners see that and they don't think I'm going to go put 14 hours on a farm. They think I'm going to go put 15 minutes on TikTok and reap a lot more than what I sowed.
Of course, there are changes because, before there's no like public transportation, there's no like internet. But now, there are things that make life more convenient, things that make life easier. Like, a car, a drive will be less than, walking or like riding a car about to the farm, those stuff. And of course, we have to take advantage of those things. But at the end of the day, for me, it's still like putting on like hard work in there, like putting on thought, your brain, your heart, your soul into it. And not just this will work for me. I don't like working that way. Like, this is fine. This is enough. Or like, I'm going to work smart today. I'm just going to put in 20 minutes. If I have to put like 15 hours today, I will. But there are days like, okay, I just have to like work for 8 hours or 6 hours. Then that would work. And I think even those like digital creators on YouTube or TikTok.
Oh yeah, a lot of them work.
A lot of them like work really because, the editing, taking of the videos. I cannot even, I take usually videos of food
that nobody's asked for.
That nobody's asked for, but that's it. I cannot like go out there and take videos and then edit it, make it to like, like profitable content. It also, at the end of the day, it's also hard work.
You're so right. Look at you defending Gen Z. Millennials out here defending Gen Z.
Look at me.
Being a TikToker is also hard work. You heard it here. I really like what you said because, right, obviously I opened with whenever we think about family and finances for all of the people who live in the global south. So Asia, Africa, Middle East, we think of the drama. Mm-hmm. But you just pointed out that the first thing you thought of was actually the ethos you have in like how to acquire money and how to treat it. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. Most people who do live across Asia or across Africa or across the Middle East, most of our grandparents were farmers. Like we're about 2 generations, we're probably like the first or second generation of office workers, right? Yeah. So I think that we do still very much know and acknowledge like the hard work that was put in, to get that education so that we could sit behind computers all day and complain about it. Just kidding. So we can appreciate that sitting in front of a computer is not backbreaking work. So I like that, that you talked about the ethos, the ethics that you learned about from your family about money. Now, conversely, I'd ask, what role has our family played in your dynamic with money? So you talked about like how they influenced you positively, but like how else have they played a role in money with you?
With how I treat my money right now, or how I earn my money?
Both.
Aside from the hard work, I think it's also like, because I also like hustle hard.
Yeah, you do.
And and that's one thing I learned from, in the family as well. Like, it wasn't just when our grandfather was out there farming, our grandmother was also like, she has like 10s, 20s, or whatever of like poultry, chickens, pigs, like whatever. Like there's always, she always had those like extra hustles,
multiple income streams.
Exactly, like
since 1918.
There's mango trees, there's corn, there's like a lot of things happening. She had like 6 kids. Yeah, she had like, I don't even know how many are we like grandkids with her, but she had time to like manage this and that.
It's true. How? I don't understand.
Exactly. And that's how I view things. That, when I think that, this is so hard. Like, my contract isn't working. But I always like go back to that. Like, if these people, like in my earlier generations, were able to put up something.
Totally.
Right? Then I probably can finish this MOA by 12 midnight tonight. So yeah, and also how I treat like income. It affected everything. And yeah, like you said, creating multiple sources of income, even though it doesn't yield like I always remove that in my head that if I start something that can create me just a tiny income. Yeah. That still pay for my grocery, my electricity bill, or my parking area. That's fine. Yeah. Yeah.
That is so true. I think often, and I hear this a lot of people, they're like, I need to be making more money. And they overcomplicate it. Mm-hmm. And it's like 1 is more than 0, and 2 is more than 1, and 10 is more than 1. You don't need to go into financial modeling about like, is this even more worth it than something else? Sometimes the key really is just to do something. Yeah. I think another really key thing that both sides of our family, the Kenyans and the Filipinos, really played with when it comes to me and money was the importance of asset ownership and the importance of not being in debt. So for me, I really for me to feel financially safe, I needed to own outright, no mortgage, a house. Like somewhere where me and my family, if everything goes to crap, we can live in it. We can, grow some food on it if we need to, and we can survive. That was such an important part of my whole thinking. And it became even more apparent during COVID when actually all the world ground to a halt. And you had to ask yourself, do you have what it takes to survive? Do you have shelter and do you have food? And that was the first time our generation has really been confronted with that. Whereas our grandparents' generation, I mean, this was every day, right?
Right.
So that was something that was very particularly different about, like, I spent so much of my time in the States, and most people never even thought about, like, just owning a piece of land or a piece of house outright. They're always like, oh no, mortgage, all this stuff. And I was like, no. I just want to own the house and the land, and then I'll feel like more secure. And that is very much, you know, the attitude and approach to money of our grandparents on both sides, of farmers, right? Own the land.
Yeah, owning a land.
Be able to survive on your own.
Yes. Owning a land and, you know, not paying mortgage on it.
Yeah.
I even remember that they used to pay, like, land with like actual cash. So yeah, I was looking back, it's like, oh my god, there was no bank transfer before. There was, like, I don't think they even, like, considered checks, but I saw them, like, transacting
cash,
you know, like, paper, like, writing on paper.
Yeah.
And there was this lawyer who was, like, notarizing things, and they were, like, exchanging a title with, like, some cash.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always been like that. Like, owning something is very important.
Owning the asset.
Yes,
yeah.
Owning the asset, and owning, you know, like, a backyard with, like, food, with, like, abundant food.
Yes.
And keeping, like, sacks of rice in the barn. So yeah, all those stuff, all those things. And, you know, simple as it may seem, but like you mentioned, during COVID, what did we need? A house.
You needed sacks of rice and a house and some food.
And maybe internet.
And maybe a little bit of internet. No, it's absolutely true. Yeah. No, that was a really, I think, pivotal moment for a lot of people in our generation, because what we started to see as millennials, we started to see a huge exodus of our age group leaving cities and going and finding that exact rural life, right? Growing, that's a huge outward migration trend from away from urban areas, because they realize, like, guys, I'm kind of on my own. And obviously, I don't want to be alarmist to any of our listeners out there. It's not that you're on your own, of course not. But I think so much of financial freedom and a financial journey is also being aware that, like, am I able to stand on my own 2 feet at any given time? And if my answer is no, what is it going to take to get there? Because life happens, things happen. Are we still living through the pandemic? We might still be living through it. Who knows? And what am I going to do, like, if or when these things happen? Like, what is my plan? And yeah, I think people learning that lesson from people who literally build homesteads it's indescribable.
And I just want to add to, in your question earlier, what has the family played? What role has the family played when it comes to money? I don't know if you remember, but Ina would always tell, our grandmother would always tell, don't be lazy, be industrious. Like, like, that's always in my head. Don't be lazy, be industrious. And she would always tell that, you know, if you feel like lazy, go look at the ants and look at their ways, because, you know, the ants store food during the summer season. So
I just had an epiphany. Do you know that I sometimes go outside to look at the ants? And I do this to contextualize myself that, like, Mother Nature, like, I am but another thing in nature. And we're busy. Like, Mother Nature's, like, storing food. They're doing things. They're building.
She says they are storing food during the summer season, so that during the rainy season they will have something to eat.
Yeah.
I always see. I'm almost 40 years old, but it's still in my head. So
Inang is always in our heads.
Right? So in order to have money, it's not that, you know, if you're, you know, there are other factors of, like, you know, like having, like, a sufficient income, having a living wage. There's a lot of factors, and I don't want to, like, undermine these factors, but she always says, don't be lazy. And I personally apply that in my life.
100%.
And I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen too, like, you know, like, people who we really know, like, close to us, who have, you know, like, moved away from that advice, and it wasn't a nice,
very diplomatically put, moved away.
Yeah.
What was the actual statement that Inang used to always say? Lazy people don't eat.
Yeah.
That was her famous phrase. I mean, the term industrious, she said it so much that it literally is stuck in my husband's vocabulary now. He's like, I'm a good husband. I'm industrious.
Right?
because my inang says it so much. So you just tapped on the uncomfortable. Yeah, we do have members in our family. Some members of the family, in every family, heed the lessons of our super industrious grandparents, right? Like, all of us know that. And then there are other members of the family who choose a different path. And I think one of the unique differences between families in the global South and families maybe in like Western countries is family in the global South is the big F. So it's not just mom and dad and kids. It's mom, dad, kids, cousins, aunts, uncles, you know, literally everybody.
Cousins.
Neighbors. Like, you are, and the thing is, it's not just rhetoric. Like, there is this responsibility that we all have to each other. And the challenge is, where does that responsibility begin and end? So when one of our, first cousins calls and says, hey, my daughter needs help with school fees, I have to ask myself, okay, like, is that my responsibility? And even if it's not my responsibility, is that something that I should be contributing to? And this is something when I was living in the West, people like, that's unheard of. Like, why would you pay for your cousin's kid that's like your second cousin? Because it's not your second cousin. In the Philippines and even Kenya, like your first cousins are basically your siblings. That's the relational equivalent of your siblings. So it's not that their kids are your second cousins. Their kids are your nephews and nieces.
Yeah.
And so there is this extension of responsibility. And it really is, especially because sometimes our families are so big, it's really hard to navigate when is enough? And I know, particularly in the Philippines, and I'd like you to speak to this, there's so much pressure on Filipinas, on Pinays, particularly like your friends, you, like professional, decent wage earning, living in the city. We're all on Facebook and Instagram and our families are watching the whole thing. And they're like, if you have enough money to go on that holiday, you have enough money to pay for your third cousin's second operation on his toe. Really? And then they will straight up DM you and give you the guilt trip and all of this thing. So I know this is a real struggle. And it has really like devastated the finances of a lot of young women. Like, they're never able to save enough. They're never able to invest enough because their family's literally like taking everything. So that, how would you say, like, where is the line? To whom does your responsibility extend? And where's the boundary? And how do you create boundaries? Because I think, particularly the Pinays out there who are listening, they're like, tell me, like, where, and look, there's a number of more passive aggressive tactics you could use, like not responding to phone calls or not responding to DMs. But let's pretend we want to have open communication with our family. Like, what's the boundary, one boy?
I started after law school. I mean, I didn't have any money. Like, I had to start like really, really with nothing. So like everything was like on a budget, like everything, like at the outset, I know what I can afford and what I cannot afford. And everything was like really tight.
Yeah.
And during that time, of course, I cannot really like loan out something, because I have a tight budget and this is my budget and I live in the city and it's not really cheap to live in the city even before, like that was 10, 11
No, Manila's expensive.
Yeah, it's quite expensive. And then maybe like 2-3 years in the job and, like when you move to a different office and they give like a better compensation package with, with some perks and all. And then you feel like, oh, I have some
disposable income.
Yeah, I have this disposable income because, I'm single, I don't have a child, and I don't really live life like lavishly, like I like nice things occasionally, but not like the whatever.
I'll attest you're reasonable.
So, I have extra money, and then I think, I'm not sure if that was a mistake or just let's call it a lesson. Whenever somebody would like ask for something, and I know that I have disposable income, it would be very easy for me to just give it.
Yeah.
And it's fine because, I know that I'm okay with my job and I'm quite secure with my job. So I know that I will not be sacked anytime. So it's fine with me that, I'm going to earn this anyway next month or something. But then, like later on, when I started to I want to build myself.
Yeah.
Like it was more difficult now to take public transport.
Yeah.
So I had to for me, it was really a tough decision if I should get a car or not, because disposable income will go to that car.
Yeah.
And then, but I actually put in a down payment first for my condo. And then, after 2 years, I think, or 1 year, no, 2 years, I got a car. So the bills, the salary was increasing, but the bills were also increasing.
Yeah. By the way, they call that lifestyle creep.
Right? And of course, I cannot be homeless.
No. But your lifestyle creep wasn't I'm buying new designer bags. You were very, kudos to you. You started buying a property very young. Most people don't do that.
And I think it worked for me because now, it's twice, thrice the prices. So the salary increase, this and that, but then the disposable income starts to shrink.
Yeah.
Because, there's this and that. You have to pay insurance for your car, for your house.
Yeah.
All those things adulting, the millennials call it adulting. And I'm not complaining because, I'm grateful that I can, that I have the provisions to do these things. But what I realize is that it's not very easy for me to if somebody asks me, hey, can you lend me 50,000 pesos? I would whoa, that's a lot. I would be shocked. Or even 30,000. That's it's shocking because I would have to cut on these things, and there are things that you cannot cut because your checks will bounce if you cannot deposit for your mortgage or something like that. And there has been an ongoing talk for a long time already because I think I mentioned to you before that my church actually in the Philippines has a very healthy discussion on finances. And one of the speakers would actually talk about the sandwich generation, like you mentioned, millennial women with, careers or single or even married in the metro. They are usually called the sandwich generation because they have to provide for their older generation, their parents, their cousins, their sisters, siblings, or whatever. And then now they're actually, when they start a family or, start to build their career, they're sandwiched between the older generation and the next generation. And also paying for their kids and also paying for themselves. And sometimes they can no longer they're so financially distressed because being in that sandwich generation is so hard because you're actually budgeting for 3 groups of people. Your older generation or your extended family, and then you, and then your kids or whatever you're paying for. So I think that's the number one cause of financial distress. And even though you're already a middle manager in the Philippines, and it's not really the salaries in my country isn't actually really huge. So you really have to do budgeting just to save here and there, even just small amounts. So for me, what I learned from that is that I don't want to put myself in a position. I still want to be generous, of course. Whatever I can, I will. Whatever I can help with, I will. But I also don't want to put myself in a position that in 1 year or in 2 years, I will be oh my God, I don't have any money left for, to pay for this or to pay for that. Or if I have a lump sum coming up, I will panic, or I don't want to put myself in a situation like that. So what I'm doing right now is, I still practice generosity, but I also consider first, it should be in my budget. Yeah. It should be in my budget. How much can I dispose this month, or how much is I usually call it my happy money. A small amount that can be if I like a nice dress or a nice shirt or whatever, I can freely use that without being guilty about it. But I'm trying to put it there. Yeah. So you can still be generous with this particular amount without being like, because I also feel bad when somebody asks me for like financial help, especially when you know that they're actually like need financial help. So that putting it on a budget, but practicing generosity, but putting it within your budget. And number 2, I think, what else? I forgot.
You mentioned budgeting for generosity. But we had also had a conversation about finances and faith on another episode. And you'd mentioned planting in good soil.
Yes, of course.
So it's not just, okay, which is great. Like when you want to be generous with your family is an important part of life, but don't do it to your detriment is what you're saying. Yeah. And make sure that you actually have a budget for it. So budget your happy money line. And that could be, your concert tickets, your whatever, like all of it. And part of that can be this month, I'm going to be really generous and take one of my cousins to a concert. So I think that's really good advice. But what about if like you just don't feel like giving money to a particular person? Like, what do you do?
Then I don't. No, because generosity should come from the heart. And when you give something, that you should also there should also be joy in your heart when you're giving it, and not like you're like, I have to give Rosalia like $100. Why? It should be like.
But do you think it's that easy? Come on, you've been in some situations where it's like, let's be real with everybody. Chismosa is real. Yeah. Gossip is real. Like sometimes being in a family feels like being a diplomat. Like you have to balance a lot of things. So beyond obviously, which is great advice, give with joy in your heart. What about those situations where you're being really pressured that despite what the joy in your heart is saying, everyone's like, you have to do this thing. What do you do?
This is coming again from my perspective as a Christian. This was actually preached in my church so many times. And it's actually true that when usually, like if I get asked for you to loan something or to lend rather, when you lend, it's in the Bible, you actually make the borrower your slave. So I don't know. I don't know if this will also work for others. Like for instance, like, hey, I need like 10,000 pesos or like 20,000 pesos for this and that. And our leaders would say that, instead of like lending, think of an amount that you can actually give, even without them paying you back.
You want to know why your preacher says that? Because the reality is when you lend to your family, you often don't get paid back. So it's better to just write it off so it doesn't cause any like, hey, you're going to pay me back? Like, you're going to pay me back? No, just write it off. Because that's definitely been my experience when I've lent to different members of our family. I always give the amount that I don't mind if it ever comes back because, to be honest, it never has. And because that's the reality, right? So I think like that advice is good for 2 reasons. It's good because you won't stress out about it because you're not like, where's my money? Like texting every week. And no, you let it go. And your family member is able to get the thing that they need.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it starts with the beginning part is how much can you give? How much can you give? Even if you don't want to give generously, even if you don't want to give with joy in your heart, if you're like, look, this is what's necessary. This is what's required of the situation. What's realistically something you can give without it affecting you too much?
Yeah. Without, like stressing me out.
Without stressing you out. Oh, there's going to be so much controversy. I hope none of our family's listening to this. Just kidding. Do you think we should set boundaries with family, like straight up at the outset? So I'm going to be, probably shouldn't be this honest, but I'm going to be honest. The boundary I generally set is I just don't lend money to family, because unless I'm willing to just give it away. If it's not an amount that I can just give away, I just won't do it. Because I don't want the drama to ensue. And like rightly point out, like if it's too much for me to be like, yo, that's actually going to make an impact, then I just can't do it. Are there any boundaries that you've set?
Boundaries in families are easier said. Easier said than done. It's way easier to put like boundaries on plots of lands, But it's actually very difficult, especially for Asians. You know that, like Filipinos or Asians in general. You don't say things. You just sometimes you just ignore each other or just like pretend that nothing's happening. Like those things. And also it's not just race, not just culture, but also like a generational thing.
Yes.
It's also like, it's not like our older generations. I know this. I don't want to speak like, broadly or what, like everyone. I'm not sure. I don't think it applies to anyone, but the level of like openness and communication that we have in our generation is not the same as the openness or willing to communicate level of those who are in older generations. And I've actually experienced, that like, you just want to say something like sometimes they don't receive it like in a positive way. They feel like, you just don't want to land, or you just want to do this. And yeah, I hate the feeling of, like that, because, it's not that I don't want to, it's just that I cannot afford, right? Yeah. There's a difference of that. And in situations like that, boundaries are so difficult to specify from the outset. Yeah. But I think little by little, like this is what I can afford at the moment. And if this is what you can afford at this point, then I don't think we can do anything about it. And, like we're willing to help. This is the amount that I'm willing to help with. But outside of this, it will create an impact on whatever bills that I have to pay every month. So,
I would say that is, obviously truthful, but I'm going to just push a little bit more. In the Philippines, as you know, there is balikbayan culture. Mm-hmm. For those of our listeners who don't know what this is, it's a balikbayan is a big box full of a lot of gifts that you are expected to bring from abroad with you. So, Philippines is one of the largest exporters of migrant workers around the world. And every year, if not twice a year, everybody flies home for the Philippines around Christmas time, and they have these huge balikbayans, and they literally you have to buy gifts for everybody, and you have to give money and this whole thing, right? And I remember when I hadn't been back to the Philippines for a long time, and I remember finally, I was still a student that time when I came to visit. I was still in grad school, so I didn't have a ton of money. I had enough money for my plane ticket, which was already huge because I was flying all the way from the UK. And I had enough money. I think I brought like a couple of gifts, like for you and Inang, but I didn't have balikbayan levels of money. And I remember initially being like, oh, I should probably not go until I can. And feeling this like pressure. And then I was like, that's dumb. Like, why should I not see my family because I can't pretend I have more than I actually do? And I feel like there is this pressure, particularly, it's not just from the OFWs, overseas foreign workers. It's also from like, there's this perception, you're a lawyer in the city, one boy. Hey, Rosalia, you work abroad? Like, there's this expectation, even though you're like, no, do you want to see my pay slip? Like, that doesn't correlate. But there's this thoughts, particularly in the Philippines, like, and this not just only the Philippines, I've seen this in Kenya, I've seen this all over the place. Like, whoever's abroad or in the big city is like making so much money, and really you're just hiding it because like it must be there. And you can have as many times say like, I can't afford this, and try and explain, especially, I feel so bad for OFWs coming from America now. People think, oh, but you're so rich, you live in that big house. They're like, I have a mortgage, like I'm leasing I don't have all this money. What could that conversation look like? Because I know a lot of people in that position. I was in that position where you even feel like, ashamed to come home from Christmas if you don't have everything for everybody. Yeah. And when you say everyone, like literally everyone.
Yeah. And it also like costs a lot.
It can be thousands and thousands of dollars.
So How to have that conversation?
Yeah.
I think it's on a case-to-case basis. Like, you, like what I mentioned earlier, that, when there's a need, then you tell them this is what I can afford. And when it comes to like, like balikbayan, being a balikbayan or being an OFW or being like somebody who works in the big city, like in Manila, where, people feel like you're earning so much, because especially in my case, I'm arte, so yeah, I don't want to be ugly, so it's also part of my budget, but how to have this conversation? I honestly don't know how to put it on like on a bigger scale. Like, hey, this is what, but like I said, I always try to be generous. So, little by little, I put in some things and that to be, for my family, like my close family, to have something from me on, maybe on Christmas or something for their birthdays, and not generally like grand things, but some gifts of appreciation or something. But I always keep into my head as well that I always have to keep that amount in a budget, and how to communicate it, I still don't know the answer. But I try to every single time that I am approached to like give this and that, then that's when I tell. So it's on a case-to-case basis.
Okay.
There's not like I go there and, okay, here's my rule number 1. I don't have that. I can't. I also cannot. Yeah.
That's actually really helpful advice. I think the thing that you keep mentioning is like, you're almost like, I have a family fund, and this is where, requests, holidays, everything, make sure that's accounted for in your budget. No matter how big or small, it can be small, but just let's not pretend the requests aren't coming in. Just have a place for it in your budget, and then treat each subsequent request on a case-by-case basis. But I think the bottom line, the boundary, maybe rule that maybe you're not saying, but that is implied, is don't give any more than you can actually afford.
Yeah.
Because anything beyond that hurts everyone.
Yeah. And you cannot also give what you don't have. Like, I mean, like we're actually I'm actually in my 10th year of working. Yeah. And to be honest, it's exhausting to be an adult. No, I'm so grateful. I mean, I'm so grateful, and I actually consider myself privileged to be in here. Like, I'm not like affluent or whatever, like crazy rich or whatever, but like, I'm grateful that I can do these things. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that for those 10 or 11 years now, it was just like hustling. Yeah. So I also put value to that. Yeah. That whenever I feel like it's like I feel discouraged, I also put value to that. Hey, it's okay. You're okay. You haven't been doing drugs. But yeah, I also put value to that. I also put value to the hard work that I put in it. So that's how I also like honor whatever I get from this hard work. Yeah.
My gosh. I'm really excited. I'm really interested to know if anybody is out here listening, what you think of those guidelines, which is like, be generous in spirit, but not to the point where it's harmful to yourself, and deal with requests on a case-by-case basis. I'd love to know if you think those would actually work, or if you're like, that would never work, or, if you have other strategies. Like one of my strategies is like, don't respond to calls and leave town. But obviously,
I might have done. I might have done that. Don't respond to calls, and I actually left.
Okay, so there are many, many strategies to dealing with finances in your big family. So what are some? I would love to know from the listeners, what are some strategies that have helped you navigate your money in your family? Because Mboya has shared with us hers. I've shared with you mine, which is basically dodging everybody. And I know that this is a constant struggle with so many women that we meet and that we speak to, and who are part of the Bixie community. It's such a struggle, in fact, that a lot of companies have come to us and said, can you help us with our female staff? Because they come to work so stressed out about money that they can't even focus at work because they have 15 million family members that they have to pay surgeries for and school fees. And it's just too much. One person cannot feed a village. So I know that this is a really, really big topic that I don't purport to try and solve in the next within 30 minutes. But I would love to hear everybody else's stories and also some strategies that they have. So with that being said, I really want to thank you, Wambui, for joining on today's episode and being really just and really sharing your experiences. Mm-hmm. So perhaps you can just recap your own strategies in your own words. If you had to sum it up, 3 steps, what would you say?
Number 1, which is very important for me, finding or creating additional sources of income that could help actually your money dynamic. Not like create like $1 billion source of income or like 100,000 pesos per month. No, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000. That goes a long way. And put some money here and there. Like small amounts. That mean? Our grandmother used to put like money here and there.
Yeah, she used to hide it
in her
burying it in the ground,
like La Casa, the storage box, which is like from the Spanish era. I don't know. There might be ghosts there, but to be fair, she has money in there. So now it's a different dynamic because I don't have a La Casa that I could put my money in, but put in some provident fund or like put in like a little savings here or like an ITF here. But when you sum it up, it could still pay, like if you have an emergency, like dent on your car or like an emergency medical surgery or whatever. So yeah, that's the second. And third, which was a difficult lesson for me. Not because I can afford it, I will get it. Yeah. So yes. So because if you can afford it, it's fine then. But I'm trying to tell myself that not because I could afford it.
Just because I can afford it doesn't mean I should get it.
I should get it now. Like, yeah.
That's a lot. I'm hearing from your tips on managing family and finances, I'm hearing a lot of self-work, which is really interesting.
So hard.
Because when you think of family and finances, particularly as like, a Western educated person, I keep thinking, well, what are the external boundaries you're setting? And you're like, well, that's not realistic. Mm-hmm. You're saying the boundaries are within. The boundaries are, making sure I have pots of money that can support myself, making sure that I can afford things, making sure that I bring in more income. It's not telling my cousin's cousin to stop asking me for money. I think that's a really interesting perspective. And I think it's really going to resonate with it. It kind of just accepts that, look, we live in more communal cultures in the global South. We all have a role to play in our family.
Yes.
So stop fighting against that necessarily and start fighting smarter about it.
Yeah.
I think that's really pertinent and really helpful.
Yeah, because, there are things I couldn't control.
Yeah.
And I will try to control things I will try to manage things that I can control.
Yeah.
So if I could control my Shopee addiction, which I've successfely managed.
You have.
Right?
And by the way, she managed it because she did her Bixi number on the Bixi app.
I got super scared.
And got scared.
Right? Like, oh my God. I'm like, oh my God.
It's been over a year.
Exactly. Like, it's almost 2 years now. So, yeah. So if I could, the things I could control, I will try to control. I mean, I'm not there yet, guys. Don't be like pressured. Oh, she's so... But yeah, I'm not there yet. But, like, step by step, every single day, then...
Yeah. So, your approach is very much accept that this is part of being in a family. And allocate the requisite resources
without your detriment.
Not to your detriment. Yeah. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing those. That was very insightful. You've given me more to think about. Maybe I'll stop ignoring those phone calls. And thank you to everybody who showed up. Don't worry about jotting all of this amazing tips and tricks down. Today's episode will be available on the Bixi app. along with any reference materials that can help you along your journey. So, what do we always say? What's the day to take action about your finances? Today! So, join the Bixie movement, download our app, visit our website, join our weekly live events online, do whatever you gotta do to get that money, honey. And please join us for our next episode of Bixie Speaks, where we will once again explore the unexplored, intimate territory of what we women have to deal with on a daily basis. So stay tuned for that episode. I'm your host, Ville Gitau, over and out.